This week on the Nittany Dispatch, we discuss James Franklin's first offseason press conference, the introduction of Justin Lustig as special teams coordinator, and Penn State's freshman speaking to the media for the first time. This week on the Nittany Dispatch. Hello and welcome to the Nittany Dispatch. I'm John Sauber, Penn State football beat writer at the Center Daily Times. She is Audrey Snyder, covering Penn State for The Athletic. And Audrey, for the first time in, I think, a month and a half, right, about that, we spoke to James Franklin.
It's been a while. We're recording this on Wednesday, February 14th, also known as Valentine's Day, also known as Ash Wednesday, also known as Pitchers and Catchers Reporting Day.
Yes, and Penn State playing Michigan State men's basketball as well, because, of course, why not?
Sure. I mean, that's John. I know you love covering Penn State basketball, so you will be there later tonight.
I will. And I
not.
just got to say, between having a game at home on my birthday and on Valentine's Day, like, somebody talk to somebody. There's no need. We don't need to do this every year.
Big Ten scheduling, John would like a word.
That's
although
right.
you and I, we both were at the Big Ten duel, or not the Big Ten, the BJC duel the other night for wrestling. The Big Ten
showing your
Big Ten duel.
Showing your wrestling expertise, Audrey.
Yes. Yeah, both teams that competed were in the BJC, and they are both in the Big Ten. But yeah, it's that time of year, which I think is kind of the crazy thing with February, is that you get these football events, John, that they kind of suck you back in, right? And you're admittedly
it's weirdly busy.
Yes, and you're admittedly, like, I felt this way. You're dusting through some cobwebs. You're working off the rust because, I was at wrestling the last few days, and you've been at basketball, and you bounce around. You keep an eye on some of the other things that are happening and who's coaching where in this sport. And then it's like, oh yeah, we're talking to Penn State now. They're second year players, and we're talking to James Franklin. And oh yeah, they hired a special teams coach, and we need to talk to him. So you're like, we're working through this, and that's what this week has felt like. But I thought there was some interesting things that came out of yesterday in the BJC media room.
Yeah, and a snowstorm, of course, that nicely mixed into.
The snow melted, John. It was actually like best case scenario for us. Not much snow.
Yes, 100%. But it was also more of an anticipated snowstorm, and it did snow a lot. We were all just mostly asleep when it happened. Specifically me, although I was up when the snow started to fall at about, I think it was like 2:00 Tuesday morning, I guess technically.
That's because the BJC duel. You were awake after that. Yeah.
Let's blame the BJC duel for my horrendous sleep schedule. But no, I think you're right. The first time we talked to James in a while, like you said, it feels like you're dusting off the cobwebs a little bit, like trying to reacclimate yourself to being on the football beat after just doing other stuff for a while, right? Like, and there's still, like, this is what makes February so busy. You mentioned the other availabilities, having the the BJC duel on Monday. There's also the return to Rec Hall men's and women's basketball games next week. Like, if this is all mixed,
I'll be there.
Yeah,
making my season hoops debut.
Genuinely surprising. But the intermingling of it all in this, like, it's not really football season, but winter workouts are going on. It is wrestling and basketball season. But
we're
like,
a month away from
wrestling's
spring ball.
Yeah, like, all of this is coming together at once. And so, like, when you prep to sit down and we're gonna ask James questions and stuff, you got to go through, like, the checklist of stuff. And one of the most, I think, important things that we got to was the addition of all these transfers, right? Like, this was the first time we had talked to James since they made the transfer portal additions. And, he spoke about Julian Fleming, AJ Harris, Nolan Rucci for the most part. He didn't really get to Jalen Kimber, which hopefully next time we talk to him, we can get some more on that. It's something, I think we all wish we would have
would have been nice.
Able to ask him about. Yeah. But I do think that he was enlightening on some of those guys. I'm curious. We can start with any of the three.
Julian Fleming.
Right. Like, that's the correct answer. But what was your biggest takeaway of what James said about Julian Fleming?
The takeaway for me, and this isn't, I'm not saying this, like, I'm not surprised by this, but it was that so far so good, right? James said he's gotten good reports from the strength staff on Julian Fleming, which is what you'd expect from a graduate transfer, that he's come in, he's kind of just put his head down and gone to work. That's what, it seems like, and everything I've heard and know about Fleming is you talk about a low maintenance guy, right? And we hear about that from James Franklin so often, that when they're looking to add to the program, they want guys that they refer to as low maintenance, high production. Well, it certainly sounds like from the reports that James Franklin said he's getting, and from what we've kind of gathered about Julian Fleming, is that like the low maintenance part is checking out. Now, are they going to get the high production? Franklin even said on all the transfers, we'll see what happens this spring. They didn't go into this portal wave guaranteeing anybody starting jobs. At least that's what they said. But we all know there's an immediate need at wide receiver. So for me, it was just that James actually said so far so good with Fleming. Again, he's been here a little more than a month, and we're a little bit less than a month from spring ball starting. So you're in that in between period, right? Um, John, we heard a lot too about the rigors of the morning workouts. That's what this month is about.
Yes.
I don't want, if anyone's eating right now, you might want to pause the podcast because there were some
That's right.
graphic descriptions that we got from guys about this.
Yeah, and real quick on Fleming, you mentioned they don't promise starting jobs. I don't think they had to. I think Julian probably could have turned on the film from
Mhm.
last year and assumed he's got himself a starting spot at Penn State, which I'd be
Fair
stunned if he
assumption.
doesn't. But yeah, we talked to a lot of guys, a lot of the freshmen during the freshman media day, for lack of a better term, right?
But now they're
And
second year guys, John.
right, like that's what like well, they're in their freshman. Some of them are in their freshman year still. Some of them
But
even
if you're early
technically are
enrolled, yeah,
past 30
yeah.
credits. Like it's whatever. It's guys who are on the team for the first time in 2023. That's who we talked to this year.
Guys who were here
Uh,
last year.
yeah, and you mentioned those winter workouts, and I keep going back to the water bags because I believe it was Jameel Lyons who said
Mhm.
that those made him throw up last year. Anthony Donka said he has the hoop drills that they do. He has a hard time with, but actually didn't mind those water bags. But the water bags really felt like the thing that everyone continued to talk about as being the source of misery during these winter workouts. We got a little bit of info about what they are because you're holding the water up and it's moving in your hands, so it's tough on your balance. But frankly, I don't ever plan on finding out how difficult they are. I don't know
I
about
was
you.
gonna say, John, we're not volunteering to go through a winter workout. I can tell you that. No one would like the end results. Although I'm sure there's some people in the building that would love to see the beat go
Yes.
through a winter workout. Um,
I'm barely going through winter. Like there's no need to, to add a workout to this. Like every morning I leave the house is a win. Like because it's just so much easier to
just
stay in the
getting
basement and
John to
watch
the
TV.
media availability was the
Yes.
workout for him.
Right.
Uh, no, Tony Rojas, I think, put it really succinctly. He said that first winter workout, he's like, listen, he's like, there's no shame in guys throwing up. Like the first workout, it happens for most people. And he's like, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said something along the lines of, as long as you throw up and keep moving, the coaching staff is okay with it. That it's, if
Nice.
you stop or if you put your hands on your knees when you throw up, that's like apparently a no-no. So you can't do that. So yeah. And that's, that's so much of, that's what this time of year is. It's behind the scenes. It's us talking to people and saying, hey, how does this guy look? Or how is this guy gaining this weight? Right. Like I was talking to Tony Rojas, and one of the things that came up was, that 30-pound weight gain that he was going through last year at this time after he early enrolled. And he said that the coaches would make jokes about, he was too skinny. And he's like, but in my heart, I knew they weren't jokes because I knew I needed to gain this weight. Um, and so, of course, you do that with the nutrition staff. You talk about resources that you're dumping into a program that is super super important. And one of the things I was listening to audio earlier today. Like I left a recorder at Rojas. I was there for part of it. And Max Ralph, great student reporter, had this which I think is a great anecdote. He was talking to Tony Rojas, and he was asked about the weight gains. Tony said that Chipotle was his go-to, and Max asked for his order. So Tony Rojas consumed in the last year a lot of white rice, black beans, double chicken, pico, corn, and lettuce. So I don't know. That seems like an NIL deal in waiting, John.
We need to have a larger discussion in the world of sports about Chipotle. I don't know if you saw this. I think it was a few weeks ago. Mikal Bridges said essentially that he of the Brooklyn Nets, of course, in the NBA,
Sure.
said that he eats Chipotle like every day, essentially, right? And
Seems like a lot.
I'm sure he won't mind me sharing this, but I also do the Nitty Gritty podcast with Tim Frazier, and I was talking to Tim off the air a little bit, and he told me he essentially lived that life when he was at college, and I don't fully understand how this happens. Why, like, how are people in this world so routine oriented, and why Chipotle? Why is it consistently Chipotle?
Well,
Is it
because it's protein, right?
That's
It's you're
true.
getting your meat, your rice. Like if you're trying to bulk up in a semi good way, right? Like you can't
These
just go
guys
to
are, like, in
McDonald's.
season, but these guys are in season. You're not trying to bulk up when I'm talking about the NBA
Yeah, but
players at point. Like,
maintaining
this is
weight, right? So this came up at wrestling last week when I was there, making my spot debut there because obviously you talk about crazy weight fluctuations. And Aaron Brooks said that throughout the course of a one workout, he can lose 6 pounds. Right. So think
that
about that, John. How much Chipotle is that, right? Like, it's so crazy when you try to conceptualize what high level athletes what they can consume. So maybe that's the thing, John. We will send you to Chipotle this off season and see how many days in a row you can go and report back.
listen, if it's on your tab, I'll do it. Chipotle ain't getting any cheaper. But it was funny, you mentioned the weight gain and stuff. We talked to Elliot Washington. One of the things he said was like that he's put on, I think it was 10 pounds, and he hasn't really noticed it. And I was like, man, you and I are the same. Like, I also don't have any clue when I
One of
put
the
on 10
same. Here
pounds.
we are.
Just we're basically the same person because of that. But no, I think, this is a transition for a lot of those guys, right? Like some of them are actually going through their first winter workouts. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like the guys that came in the summer. There's guys that this is their second time because were the early enrollees, but they're also like we talk about those transfers. Like, I mean, I'm sure Julian Fleming isn't like having this massive
Right.
adjustment, and AJ Harris probably isn't, and but like maybe things are different down at Florida, right? Like maybe for Jalen Kimber,
Mhm.
maybe things are different at Wisconsin in the way that not necessarily like the difficulty, but like the way they do it could make it more difficult, right? So those adjustments I think are going to be important too because we talk about like weight gains and stuff. One of my biggest takeaways that James mentioned during his press conference was he was talking about Nolan Rucci and said the difficulty in putting weight on him, right? Like
Yes.
because he is every bit of 6'8", which is true. Like he is very very tall, and he just has had a hard time getting weight on. He said he was originally listed, I believe, at 299, but he's now up to 305. The roster lists him at 300 still, I think. But if you take James' word for it, which we have no reason not to, like 6 pounds and whatever this has been, like a little
Month.
over a month
Yeah,
is
5
good
weeks.
progress for someone that size can play at like 330, 340 pretty easily and look slim still. Like that's not you see that a lot in the NFL, like with defensive ends, especially guys that are 6'5", like
Mhm.
weigh like 270 and they look like they're like 220. Right. And so I think that's going to be one of the biggest things that I'm watching moving forward because this tackle spot is one that we're going to be talking about, I imagine, all through spring ball, potentially all through fall camp. But Nolan Rucci being able to add weight and add the requisite strength to hold up in the Big Ten as a starter because he did it against LSU in their bowl game for Wisconsin. But doing it week after week is a different animal, especially when maybe you're not dealing with as many speed rushers in the Big Ten and there are more power rushers. I'll be curious to see like can he get to point X, like whatever that is for them by
Mhm.
the end of spring ball? Can he get to point Y by the end of fall camp to the point where he's actually competing at that job with the body type that they want him to, and if he's able to keep kind of that mobility and stuff. Because I mentioned Washington, like the fact that he didn't notice the 10-pound gain, like that's different for a corner and safety, than it is
Right.
for an offensive tackle where he might notice it a lot more as he continues to add it.
Yeah, that was one of the things that Tony Rojas said that last year. He said, "Yeah, going into spring ball last year, he's like, I felt heavy, like I felt it when I was running, And so much of this offseason for Rojas is about his speed and getting back to that level where he feels, comfortable with all of this new weight. But yeah, I did want to go back to some of the stuff you said about Nolan Rucci. Um, I'm fascinated to see what happens at offensive tackle in the spring, and then of course in the fall. James Franklin did say on Tuesday that he feels like team wide, they're in a good spot to have a good competitive spring game, which I'm sure is what our listeners love to hear. They love a good blue white game because of the depth
Correct me
that
if
they
I'm
have in this.
wrong. Didn't he say that last year too, though? Like and I know they got bit by injuries and stuff, but I
Yeah,
swear he said that last year.
probably. Honestly, I feel the spring games, I just wipe them from my
That's
memory
fair.
so quickly that I could not even tell you. I know I was there, but I could not tell you anything about anything about the blue white game. Um, I do think though, you mentioned kind of what are those target weights. I'm would like to ask, Nolan Rucci, what is that weight that they have in mind for him? Because you have Drew Shelton, you have Nolan Rucci, but then you have someone else. Well, many other else's that we can get to. But one of the things that came up with talking to the second year players was that of those 4 signees, right? You had Chim Diono, Anthony Donka, um, Javen Williams, and Alex Birchmeier. Birchmeier's the only one still working along the interior. So you've got 3 young offensive tackles developing, which is massive. Like you look at the trajectory of this program. Obviously, yes, you have to replace 2 starting spots this year with Caden Wallace and Olu Fashanu. But Anthony Donko is going, I think, to be a factor in this equation one way or the other. And the thing that I found to be so interesting, and you and I, we've talked about it on here and we've written plenty about it as of others, his performance in the Peach Bowl, right? Comes in, plays the second half with Caden Wallace, moving on to the NFL. And we were all impressed by that in that moment, or I know you and I were, right? It was like, wow, where did this
Yeah.
kind of come from? This is interesting. After talking with him on Tuesday, I am even more impressed, John, because he told us he didn't start repping at offensive tackle until the start of bowl prep. So literally within a month, he went from
And
working
this
along the inside, he was a guard, shifting over to right tackle. That's insane.
And when you say he told us, you literally mean us, because it was you
It
and
was
I believe,
us,
that were
yeah.
the only ones sitting there. But no, I was when he said that, like I kind of had to double take, and I think you because I originally asked it, then you followed up, and you're like, wait, so you're saying you didn't do it until the bowl game? And he's like,
I
yeah.
was, as anyone watching us on YouTube knows, I'm not good at hiding my expression. So I was like, wait, to be clear, you did that how? And he started to laugh. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, and if you go back and rewatch that game, the initial impression is the correct impression. He was I wouldn't like he wasn't like elite or anything, but for a freshman
Freshman.
making his first career in getting his first career in-game reps at right tackle, he was excellent. He did more than what you could expect. And I have to imagine, assuming that that translates over to, spring ball and fall practice, that I think the lightest way to put it is that he will heavily factor in. Because if he plays like he did against Ole Miss, then he's probably a starter. And if he's not a starter while playing like that, it's because they've got 2 other starters who are playing at an incredibly high level, right? Like I think that
And they're
there
going
is,
to play. They're going to rotate because I
yeah,
think that's what
for
James
sure.
Franklin even said with Nolan Rucci is like we loved what we saw at Wisconsin, but there just weren't that many opportunities. And he even said something along the lines of they didn't rotate like we do here, right? So I think
Yep.
that's of course the other angle of this is you're going to find a way to get him on the field. I was pulling it up last year. Donko, his snap counts was in the 90s for the season. So again, for a freshman, that is a significant number, especially with the bulk of them coming at the end of the year.
Yeah, especially when I believe he redshirted, right?
Yes. Yep. Was able
So
to
like
preserve the red shirt.
to get a start in a year and like a really good start in a year where you're redshirting is a really good sign for Penn State
Mhm.
to preserve that year of eligibility. Now, if he is that good, the redshirt year is probably not going to matter at the end of the road. But
Right.
still, it's good to have that available. And he's very impressive. He's on the field, but like talking to him, like he's clearly enthusiastic about this.
Mhm.
He was there for a while, right, talking to us, and he seemed to be enjoying himself. Talking
Maybe
about
they
the
didn't tell these guys that they could leave. Maybe that was the
yeah.
catch, right? They
But
they
he
didn't
seemed
know.
to really take to playing tackle, and that he said I asked him what he liked
Mhm.
more, and he said he liked the challenge of playing outside, and he said like it's different because obviously, and some of this is obvious, but it's always good to hear these guys' perspectives. Like that speed off the edge is different, right? Like you're
Mhm.
dealing with things differently, and the way you handle yourself, and your footwork and everything is a lot different. And so I'll be curious to see if he's putting that together with a limited practice window ahead of the Peach Bowl. I'm curious to see what that looks like when he gets real practice reps and really gets to work on it because he looked good then, and I have no reason to think that he wouldn't be good, moving forward. And so I, if we get to the end of the 2024 season and you tell me that Anthony Donka has more reps than any offensive tackle on the roster, like yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? Like I think I don't know that that's my expectation right now, just because a lot can change between now and the fall, but it is well within the realm of possibility that he's either their best or their most used offensive tackle next year. And that, by the way,
I still
that
think
was
Drew Shelton is your top guy. I think and then we'll see with Rucci. It looks like John disagrees with me on this. We will see. Maybe this
Mhm.
is like our new. This will be like our new gamble next season. We'll keep tabs every week. I'll report on Christian
On
Driver's
snap counts,
stats at Minnesota. I'll also report on the offensive line snap counts. But
and
one
I'll
of the
be keeping
things.
track of Dante Cephas over Kansas State.
Yes, that's right. Our weekly Cephas tracker.
That's
Um,
right.
One of the things that I always like to ask the players in a setting like this, and it's something I started doing a few years ago, and then yesterday as we were talking, I said, "Oh shoot, I always ask this. I should ask this because it's entertaining." I like to ask players, "What is the moment, or is there a moment where they feel like welcome to college football? Like maybe you got absolutely rocked on the practice field. Maybe it happened in a game. Maybe you threw up during a winter workout and you're like, this is different, right? Because it happens to everybody. And I remember talking to Micah Parsons about this and Jesse Lucetta and all these guys that have come through here, right? Like everybody has these moments. It's part of the process. There's no shame in it. And there are some really good moments that I'm compiling, and I will have them up on The Athletic this week. So I don't want to give them away, but Anthony Donko had a really good one that you and I were there for, John. But that'll be up on The Athletic. Just some nice intro to college football moments.
What's funny is I didn't know you ask this every year. I also asked this because last year I think was the first year we had the freshman media day, and so I
Imitation's the
asked.
highest form of flattery.
I didn't know you did it, and I
Yeah,
asked
because I
everyone
started it
this
the
year too.
year we got, and again, it's not like a highly original question, but the year
Yeah.
we got Parsons, we had a media day in the spring that year, and
Yes,
that was
the year
yeah,
you got Parsons when I think I was still in college. No, I wasn't in college at that point.
maybe yeah,
Uh,
it
I
was a
think
while ago.
I think that was actually my first or second year as the secondary beat writer, something like that.
So
Whatever.
you weren't there, John.
But
So
yeah,
you didn't
that's
hear me
true.
asking my very unoriginal questions.
But I do ask the same, and it is interesting that you mentioned that, and we can talk about it more once your story goes up. But I do think a lot of these guys, like, this isn't their like
Mhm,
that moment for them. That's not the realization moment. But it was interesting to hear a lot of players yesterday talking about the mental aspect and the mental
mhm.
adjustments to playing in college. And the one that kind of stuck with me was King Mack said that in high school it was just like see ball, get ball, and that was it. Right? Like there was nothing more to it. He didn't like necessarily. There's not a lot of film study, not a lot of scheme, not a lot of any of that. It's just you're out there playing, and then you get to college, and it's a complete game changer. And I think that's what makes it more impressive that a guy like him, guys like Zion Tracy and Elliott Washington, Tony Rojas to some extent, were able to get on the field specifically defensively because there's
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's more difficult, but I think it's probably a greater adjustment from playing high school defense to college defense than it is high school offense to college offense. It's still a drastic jump to do it on
Mhm.
offense, but on defense, like there's some guys who were saying like essentially like there was no like anything. It was just I'm out, you're across from me, I'm covering you, and that's it. And like, or you know what I mean? Like you're in front of
I'm
me,
gonna shut you down. Yeah.
I'm gonna try and
Yep.
beat you off the line of scrimmage, right? Like that's it. And that's all they did in high school. And then they get to college and it changes drastically. So the fact that all those guys
Oh wait, John, you're muted.
just mute myself just
You
for a second.
did. You did. It was the best 20 seconds of the podcast we've ever had.
That's tough for me to hear,
There he
but I
is.
also
There he is.
understand that.
You're back. You're back.
Uh, but no, where did I get cut off here by myself on this?
Yeah, you were getting into it, and you talking about the differences in the games at the high school level
Yeah.
from
But
this level and the
I think
transitions.
it's I think essentially I think it's really impressive that Rojas and Mac and those guys and Tracy and Washington were able to see the field so early, despite having to make a really drastic jump out of high school.
Yeah, and I think this is where the question of AJ Harris comes into the equation, right? We talked about the transfer additions. John asked James Franklin about AJ Harris, and I like the way you phrased the question, John, because you asked him what made AJ Harris the right fit, right? Because Penn State could have taken any cornerback they wanted out of the portal, or just about anyone, right? I mean, you look at the run that they're on here, the guys they've churned out. This is in destination type spot for a lot of young corners, but you get a young, talented corner. And the thing that stood out to me was James Franklin said that they don't think much has changed, if anything, in the evaluation that they had on AJ Harris, which the 5-star cornerback that Penn State recruited out of high school, versus the guy that they're now getting a year later, right? So that's significant. I know you and I have talked before, John. We said had Penn State signed him last year, fans would have been over the moon about the addition. Well, now you get him in the program. And so again, how he fits in with the rest of those corners is going to be interesting. I did not get too many of the cornerbacks. I was kind of bounced around a lot of the offensive linemen, the linebackers. So did that come up, John? Any of your conversations? Was there any AJ Harris? Are you the AJ Harris beat writer now?
Not necessarily. It came up somewhat. Wasn't a major
Mhm.
sticking point. And for those interested, you mentioned what you have coming up soon on the Athletic. I'll have, I talked to a lot of those corners and those guys in the secondary, and that transition to college and kind of what they expect and what they want to accomplish, and like specific goals and things like that. So we'll have something, at the Center Daily Times up on centerdaily.com here sometime over the next week or so on that. But I I think that the general vibe of that was similar to what James said about Julian Fleming, about how Julian came in and shut his mouth and opened his ears,
Mhm.
right? Like, and then
Yes.
guys
Yeah.
respect you that way. And I think that's presumably how it's going in the cornerback room too, based on the way that guys talked about him, based on the fact that he is in the same graduating class of high school as these guys, right? Like,
Mhm.
this is not a situation where it's like Jalen Kimber, where he's been around, he sees things, right? Or Julian Fleming at wide receiver, where he's seen things, he can involve himself, and from a leadership standpoint, because he's been there, done that. Harris is in the same group as these guys, right? Like, this is a guy going into his second year of college ball, and it's still a work in progress for him too, much like it is for Tracy and Washington and Mac and all of those corners, even to some extent Cam Miller too,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So I think that's one thing that I'm curious to see. There are, I don't want to say everyone's a starter quality piece, but I think Cam Miller is solidly, like, that's a starting level cornerback in the Big Ten. We know that. I feel confident that Elliott Washington is a starting level cornerback in the Big Ten. I know the Ole Miss game was not great for anybody, but
Mhm.
based on what we've seen out of him this year, I feel confident saying that. I also think he could play at safety, frankly. I have not seen enough of AJ Harris to make that determination. I think Zion Tracy, as he gets stronger, will also be a starting level cornerback. But right now, you have Cam Miller's a starter. We know that, right? Like, we're
Mhm.
confident we can pencil him in right now.
Let's count
And
them,
then
John.
to rotate in, you have Harris, you have Kimber, you have Washington, and you have Tracy. And so you are now up
Well,
to, yeah,
I
you have one starter and four guys with probably fighting for two spots. Like, I
yeah.
think Tom Allen's Husky rule, which is it's a nickel corner
I love
linebacker
that name.
safety. It's someone playing in the back seven who
Yeah.
isn't a linebacker purely, right? Instead of
Mhm.
three linebackers. Um, that whoever the Husky ends up being, like, I could see Washington fitting in that spot really well. I actually think King Mack would be really good in that role, especially because he talked about, this is one of my favorite things yesterday. He talked about how he's 5'9" but plays like he's 6'4", which I think is
Nice.
excellent. And it's one of those things where he just always views himself in that way. But yeah, King was excellent to speak to. By the way, he's going to be a prominent voice when I do that story. But he is a guy that would fit in that role too. So, like, you have the five guys, and then also King Matt could take that Husky spot, and so then you're really rotating in. Even though, like I said, Cam Miller's probably going to start based on my eye and based on what we've seen. I do think he'll rotate quite a bit, like, just as,
Mhm.
or will rotate more than they even did last year, and we'll see. The snap counts reflect that, right? Where it's maybe not you have corner one and quarter two, but you really have like corner 1A, corner 1B, corner 2B, and then also anyone who's playing the Husky also gets some reps there.
Corner 2B and corner not 2B.
All right. I think that's probably the best place
Whew.
to end the pod. And I don't
Nope,
mean this
nope, no, I'm
episode.
just getting
I
warmed up
mean I mean forever.
forever.
Like, never record again. I'm done. I can't do this.
Well, John, you mentioned things ending, never doing things again. That's my transition. James Franklin mentioned a lot of non-negotiables that he said that when he was interviewing for, obviously when you replace three coordinators in one offseason, you've got a lot of interviews to do. But he said with each coordinator, as he went through the process, he wanted to know what were their non-negotiables. Now, we're talking things in terms of the terminology, right? For you come in, if you're the offensive coordinator, are you going to change the terminology or what can you keep the same? Are there certain calls that are close enough that maybe to lessen the confusion, to try and flatten that learning curve with the offense, you try and keep some of that the same? Some of the challenges for the defense, right? Maybe Manny Diaz wanted certain things run a certain way, and Tom Allen wants it run differently, right? So these are all part of these non-negotiables that Penn State's working through, and that to me was really like the theme of Tuesday. Transitions, right? You're talking transitions from your first year of college football to your next. You're talking about the transition from one coordinator to the next. And I spoke with quarterback Jackson Smolik for a little bit, and he said that, it's been nice to see Andy Kotelnicki's energy so far in the meeting room, and that one of the things that they're trying to keep the terminology the same. So that, I think, I'm curious, the next time we hear from Drew Allar, like I'd be curious to know what that process is like for him as they go through this. Obviously, we know Danny O'Brien is going to be the primary voice in that room with leading that room. But yeah, what are some of those transitions that are happening? And because it was the first time we had a chance to talk with Tony Rojas since Manny Diaz left, I asked him about. I remember last year at the end of games, we would catch a lot of scenes on the sideline where game would be ending, they'd be singing the alma mater, and Rojas would be like asking Manny Diaz a bunch of questions about his performance and about what he can do better, and should I have done this or that? And so I asked him about those moments, and he said that Manny was such a great teacher for him, and that he felt like he really did a nice job of not getting him on the field too early, right? That the whole thing was, let's bring you along on special teams, and then we'll kind of see where things go from there. So it's different with Tom Allen. And that's what Tony Rojas said. He said, I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's just that it's different, right? The way he talks is different. The way he teaches is different. And these are the kinds of things, just these humanistic elements that you need this transition period, this acclimation period in this offseason to kind of figure out, because you are talking about your whole, I mean, these are massive changes, and to have 3 coordinator changes in one offseason, it's certainly rare around here. And we did get to meet coordinator number 3, John, the
Yes.
newest of the new coordinators.
Yeah, Justin Lustig spoke to the media for the first time, of course, coming from Vanderbilt, where he's a special teams coordinator. It's tough. If you're wondering why we're 30 minutes into this podcast and now we're discussing the new coordinator, it's because it's really difficult to assess how good a special teams coordinator is, right? Like when Andy Kotelnicki
Yeah.
and Tom Allen get hired, you and I can sit here and wax poetic
Mhm.
for hours about
Well,
like
and
what
to
we
be
think of
fair,
the system, how they're going to do things.
for 15 seconds you muted yourself, so we would have been here sooner, but
All right, fair enough. Uh, but no, I do think like it's just more difficult to evaluate what Lustig could be
Mhm.
doing, what they're going to plan on doing. I've said this before, like it's really difficult to evaluate for me, anyways, like kickers and punters and everything. And so I do think though he said all the right things, right? He mentioned he rooted for Penn State from afar, like he would check their
The
scores after
Pennsylvania
his
guy,
games.
yeah.
Yeah, coach at Edinburgh. I had asked him
From
about like
Erie.
coaching defense again, right? Because
Mhm.
he mentioned that he was coaching the defense when he was the head coach at Edinburgh in 2016. But if you go back before that, the last time he was a position coach on defense was 2005, I believe. Yeah, 2005 at a D3 school, I believe.
Yeah, because
And
he
so
coordinated
it's
the defense at Edinburgh, but before that,
yeah,
it was a significant amount of time.
and so it's I asked him about that transition. He mentioned all of the things that he has seen as an offensive coach,
Mhm.
and he knows how they operate and what that can bring to the defensive room, which I think is really interesting, right? Like I think it's going to
Really good
help.
perspective, yeah.
Yeah, it's a perspective, like, it's why Rob Smith was working presumably with the offense last year, right? Like, you get that defensive perspective for the offense. It's why this was famously, Vic Fangio was working with
Mhm.
the Eagles offense ahead of the Super Bowl last year because he was helping the offense understand what, like, the defense was about to do and everything. So,
I thought
I
we were
do
gonna
think
make it, John, a full podcast without an Eagles mention, and we didn't.
have you met me? Of course we're not
Mm,
gonna. Like,
no.
we're never
I
going
knew
to, I
I
promise.
knew how this was gonna go. I knew,
Yes. So did I.
we both knew.
But no, I think he's in a unique position to help the defense out, and I think he's going to, in all likelihood, like produce good special teams here.
Mhm.
Right, the data backs up that maybe it's not even as good as Stacey Collins or necessarily the best in the country, but I don't think that special teams will be a negative for the program moving forward or anything like that.
And
And
the
also he mentioned he hasn't when you asked it, he hasn't mentioned like the evaluated the kickers and punters because they've been going through winter workouts, and it's
and
like,
that's what I said to him. I
what are you
was
going
like,
to learn?
yeah, I was like, I understand you haven't been here long, but do you have any early impressions so far? And it was pretty much like he was very nice about it. He was like, no, we've just kind of gone through winter workouts, and it's fair. But it's also like we know that you're bringing in a transfer kicker, right? You have a new kicker. You have to replace your kicker. And that's what kind of opened the door to my other question, because I was full of special teams questions yesterday.
That's right,
Um,
and only
I
special
wanted
teams
to
questions.
know, no, never, a lot of questions. I wanted to know, given the importance of the transfer portal, right? Is Penn State still going to be a program that is going to heavily, or as heavily as a team does, recruit kickers out of high school? Are they still going to do that and invest scholarships in high school kickers? Because you look at the success that they've had bringing in guys out of the portal. You can also look at it at punter. We've seen it last year with Riley Thompson, and we'll continue to see it because we know he's got more eligibility remaining. Um, what's the value of recruiting a high school specialist? Is there? And he, Justin Lustig said it's something that they're kind of working through, because you look at it and he said, we're going to recruit a lot of preferred walk-ons, and that's going to be the thing. And you kind of, you go about it that way. So I just wonder if maybe we see a bit of a philosophical shift in the recruitment of scholarship kickers and punters out of high school with this program, because it is something where, you go back and you look at it and you say, okay, right now we're looking at two scholarship specialists and Sanders Sahadak, and you had Alex Paqueta before we left for Rice, and you say, okay, well, if Sahadak isn't the guy, why did you add somebody from the portal, right? And I don't know, he could be the guy, right? But I'm just saying you added someone. You look at Riley Thompson, the return you got there. So I just wonder if, we can even go back farther, right? Jordan Stout was kind of their first big portal get. You look at what Alex Falcons was able to do. And this is a question that I have all throughout kind of college football of, is the value of the high school kicker and punter still what it once was, or is that something that the portal has changed? So that was my
To be
burning
clear,
question.
you were referring to freshman, senior, sophomore Riley Thompson
Yes,
when
from
you mentioned
Australia.
him.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Never junior, I think. Never junior. No, maybe never sophomore, actually, because now a junior. Last year was a
Yeah.
senior.
But he already
Year
walked
before
at
was a
senior day
freshman.
once. Yeah.
So it went, I believe, as we discussed at length on this
Freshman.
pod one time. Honestly, shocked that I ended up being right about that. Like, genuinely stunned that I ended up being right that he had 2 years left. But it was freshman, senior, junior, and then
Was
senior
there?
again would
I don't know if
be.
ever. Yeah.
You would
But he
never
was
be listed as a
introduced on
sophomore.
senior day. Yeah, he's going to be like 30 by the time he runs out of eligibility here, maybe.
That's right.
Um,
But I think your philosophies, like, or what you're hinting at, is correct, right? I don't see a reason for teams to go to high school kickers and punters with scholarships, right? Like, it feels
yeah.
more like a thing you try and get preferred walk-ons. You try and help guys with NIL and stuff like that, and then you move on to, okay, if we don't have anyone here, you go to the portal every year if you have to, right? And maybe eventually one of the preferred walk-ons hits, and you have a scholarship guy until his eligibility's out. And you don't have to worry about it, but to me, like, I think that is probably the best strategy moving forward. It saves a scholarship for another position that is going to see the field more, and it puts you in a spot where, frankly, like, you can. I have to imagine. I don't know this for certain, that it's a little bit easier to recruit those guys, right? Because if you see a smaller school guy doing well, you kind of can just go get them, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's not a ton of
You can go
issue with
the Alex
scheme.
Falcons route, right?
Yeah, it doesn't. There's no, like, oh, is he a fit at the position,
Mhm.
like the way we do it? It's like, he's kicking. Like, that is not going to change too drastically from program to program. So I do think that is right. I think that is probably the best way to handle it moving forward. I'm curious to see if that's what they do. But yeah, it was nice to talk to Lustig today
Mhm.
after, I don't know, it's been what, 3 weeks since
Yeah, I
since he
believe
was
he was
hired,
hired
something like that.
January 17th, because I had to
Yeah,
look that up in my story. So yeah, it
about a
had
month.
been, yeah, so it had been a little while. And this is that interesting time frame where we'd mentioned earlier. You've got spring ball starting up in mid-March after Penn State comes back from spring break, which is like all of this is rapidly approaching. And then you've got Penn State's pro day that'll happen in March, right? And we did find out on Tuesday Penn State will have 10 players at the combine, which is a massive number. And so that'll be, again, this has become like the combine's become a showcase event for Penn State. This is something
Yep.
we saw a lot with Dwight Galt. It's carried over to it with the I guess do we call it not even a new strength staff, but the new look, same kind of strength staff with
I
Chuck
think there
Losey.
I think there have been, I don't want to call them significant because I don't want to over
Hmm.
exaggerate it, but I think there have been changes
Some
for
changes,
sure.
yeah.
Like, changes that are very different from the way they used to do things.
See, it's a season of change around here, John. That's
That's
what that's what the month of February seemingly is all about. I know you and I think, will be at the Penn State will have their thon availability this weekend. The 46-hour
Right.
dance marathons going on, which the football team, like all of athletics, always has a role in that.
And
So
they'll
we'll
make some players available to us then. We'll see who that is when the
Yeah,
time
so
comes. But
yeah, we'll see who those folks are. Talk to them. I know I've got a story up on the Athletic today that was interesting. There's a little bit of a Penn State angle, but more of a wide look all throughout college football. Myself and colleague Grace Rayner went and tracked down current and former college football coaches and asked them about one of their probably least favorite subjects. We wanted to know, who are the recruits that got away? Which recruits broke their hearts in honor of Valentine's Day? There are some great answers within that story. And it was also, we were putting this together while coaches were out on the road. And it's like, they're calling you between visits or they're texting you back and, hey, I'm going here. I'm at this high school. I'm doing this and that. So that was a very, very fun story. I will tell you, I talked with Joe Moorhead, and Penn State fans. Joe Moorhead's biggest recruiting heartbreak is one that I know many of you have also thought about, one that ripped your heart out, one that is one of the greatest college football what ifs. That, of course, being the loss of Justin Fields.
it
So that
really
is
is a great what if too.
crazy. Like, you talk about the butterfly effect, right? Like, it was one of those stories that you peel back the layers, and the anecdote in the story from Joe Moorhead that you'll want to check out on the Athletic was a really good retelling of kind of the months where Justin Fields was committed, where they felt like they had something special, and then ultimately he, in a nice way, but rips your heart out and decides that he's going to go elsewhere.
Yeah, make sure you check that story out over at the Athletic. I will be doing the same. It is on the reading list along with the 40 other things I've added over the last 2 days. As
Keep adding to the
we've
list.
That's right. We've been working more over the last 2 days, so I haven't done as much reading as I would like. That will surely be on one of the things that I do after the men's basketball game tonight. I have a notebook up from yesterday's availability up on SundayDaily.com. You can check that out if you'd like. We will be around over the next few months. We will be podcasting as things happen. Just in case we don't record before the combine, who do you think who's your one Penn
Ooh.
State player that is going to surpass expectation, is going to like have that performance, right? Like the guy that's going to shoot up boards.
I, I mean, I
I know I'm
feel
putting you on the
like,
spot. I do have an
yeah, I
answer
mean,
for
we know Olu Fashanu is going to be a lock, right? I feel like Chop Robinson, we know, is going to be mostly a lock, right? I know there is some consternation about whether or not Kalen King gets into the first round or not, right? I know there's some.
I don't know if there is anymore.
I was going to say,
You know,
do you feel
I think
like
he's.
that since the Senior Bowl that you feel like that has been washed away?
This isn't my pick for who will
Oh
be
no, I'm not saying it's
on
my
that
pick. I'm
level.
just.
Yeah, I know, but I'm saying I do think he will help himself at the
Mhm.
combine, and so he could regain some of that. But as of now, yeah, he's pretty universally projected as a second round pick. And talking to people in the NFL that you know, I've heard much the same, right? That the general idea right now is day two. I do think he'll do well at the combine though, and that will help him out.
Yeah, I feel like Chop Robinson is someone that we're gonna say, like, just because we don't. I mean, because he was only here for 2 years and he was hurt for part of last year, so we didn't get to talk to him a ton while he was here. But I feel like his testing numbers when he was here, thinking back, I'm trying to remember if he was on Bruce's freaks list last year or not. I know Olu's got some
Can't
freaky numbers.
remember.
I feel like he might have been. I'll go with Chop, which feels like a bit of a safe pick. I maybe Curtis Jacobs is one of those guys who, probably maybe puts up some good testing numbers, good speed, that type of thing. Who's your pick, John? Who's the person that you have in mind that I'm like missing?
So there were two that I was thinking of. By the way, Chop was number 9 on the freaks list. Olu was 23. As I look
Okay,
these things up as I speak to you now,
there we go.
uh,
See,
there are two guys that I think are going to. One, I think King's going to help himself, but he's not one of the two. But there are two guys that I think could really shoot up the board. The one I'm not going to pick is Adisa Isaac because he's already moving up because of his
okay,
Senior Bowl performance. Because again, you talk to people like they're really, as they dive in deeper, they really like Adisa. This is something I think you and I have talked about. I don't know if we've done it on here, but I think there's a chance that he's the first defensive end from Penn State taken in this draft. I think they've got a legitimate chance to get both guys in the first round.
ooh,
Uh, yeah,
that's a bit of a take, John. That's interesting.
I think
Okay.
he's going to have an excellent combine. I think he's going to
Hmm.
have an excellent pro day as he continues to I don't think people understand how athletic he is, right? I think
Yeah.
Chomp having like one of the best first steps I've ever seen, if not the best first step I've ever seen, has kind of
Mhm.
overshadowed how athletic Adisa is. Um, but I do think that he's going to do well at the combine. But my choice, and maybe this is obvious, is Theo Johnson. I just think like the height,
That's
weight,
fair.
speed stuff
Yeah.
is going to blow people away. The length, the hand size, all of it is going to be like, and he's really good too. It helps that some of the production is there, and he's been able to perform. But I think he is the guy that right now you see a lot of middle rounds of the draft with him, round 3, round 4, round 5. I think there's a chance he moves up into the second round. That I don't feel as confident about that as I do about Adisa potentially ending up in the first. But yeah, I think that Theo Johnson has a chance to continue his ascent and be a second round pick, because you look, frankly, Brenton Strange went in the second round last year, and every draft class is different. I'm not saying
Mhm.
that
Right.
just because Strange went in the second that Theo will do better, because I think he's a better prospect. But I
Stranger
do
things have
think
happened.
boo. I do think he is a better prospect, and I do think he has a legitimate chance to go higher than Brenton Strange did. So that's kind of the one for me. Curtis Jacobs, you're right. I think he's going to do well. I think there's going to be some size questions though, and like what
Yeah.
exactly he is at the next level. Um, Johnny Dixon, like we've already seen the numbers with his
Daquan
arm length.
Hardy's speed is gonna be
Hardy's a
that's
good
gonna be
one.
fun to see. Yeah.
The punt return stuff makes him a little more
Yes.
interesting too, but he
Yes.
still feels like a potential late round
Mhm.
UDFA.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
Um, but yeah, I think they have a legitimate chance that we end up seeing 3 Penn State guys going in the first round, which a lot of people projected heading into the year. But it's not the 3 that we thought. Right, 2 of them are, and Chop and Olu. But I think Adisa has a chance to get up into that 20 to 32 range, and Kalen probably dropping out at this point to the second round. With again, he's there. There are 2 months till the draft. There's the whole draft process still has to play out. And I think he has a chance to regain some of that momentum he had prior to the year with his stock, because a lot of this stuff can be narrative based. Some of it, like all it takes is one team to really believe in you. We saw that last year when Sean Clifford went to your beloved Green Bay
I knew
Packers.
you were going there. I absolutely knew you were going there.
I don't know that I've ever talked about this on the podcast, but from the teams I talked to, most had him as a UDFA, right, a priority free
Yeah,
agent, and
a lot
and
did.
like I said, all it takes is one, and the Green Bay just happened to be the one there. But yeah, I think that there is a good chance that we see some Penn State guys steal the show, that we see some stock rise there. Maybe it falls back afterward, because that tends to happen with this stuff, like especially in media mock drafts, right? It's
Oh
just
yeah.
tougher to tell. Which, by the way, we do this every year. Myself and Josh Moyer will likely have a mock draft ahead of the
You know what?
NFL draft,
I
which we
just
nailed some
completed
picks last
one.
year too.
I completed
So
one. Me and my some of my college football colleagues at the Athletic, we do one, and the funny thing, well, what I think is funny, I'm sure there's probably some readers out there that are like, "Don't let her do this." Every year, I ask if they'll let me draft for the Bears so I can torpedo them, but
nice.
they don't let me do that. But yeah,
That's
so I was
probably for the
drafting.
best.
Yeah, I was drafting for the Packers, the Eagles, and the Steelers this year. So John, I won't. The thing is, there were
Ty-
possibilities of me to take some Penn State players for each of those teams, and I did not.
Tyler Guyton or bust. That's all I'm saying.
That's
Go
well,
Birds.
it's
That's all I'm
I
saying.
I have one
Uh,
of the 3 teams taking him, John, and it is not your team.
all right, that's fine. We can argue after this.
It's mine.
Uh, but no, Tyler Guyton obviously shooting up draft boards. I am now fearful that he won't be there when
Mhm.
the Eagles
Yeah.
pick. But no, Moyer and I do that mock draft every year. It's a lot of fun. It's not like we're not entirely guessing. Like there is some just putting fit
Mhm.
together. We're talking to people, right? Like it's not just these are two
Throwing
random
darts,
people
yeah.
putting together. Yeah, we nailed a few picks last year. I think we had Bijan at 8, which that had been a thing for a while. I'll put it that way. And it's a lot of fun. We are in draft season though. This is one of my favorite times of the year. We will be talking these draft eligible guys and everything.
We'll
And
be at Pro Day.
yeah, we'll be at Pro Day. We'll, I assume, be recording not long after Pro Day when my
Yeah.
spine is shattering from the Haluba Hall turf, which is
Oh,
never
from
fun.
standing on the turf. What a tough job,
What do you
John.
want from me? I got a bad back. It's tough. I hate it. If I could simply not have a bad back, I would not. Like if that were my call, I would be doing that. Uh, but no, we'll be here for that. Probably be talking after the combine too, potentially before the combine. We'll see. And as Penn State stuff happens, we'll be around. You of course can find all of that here at the Nittany Dispatch. Don't forget to give us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. That's always helpful. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button down below. Hit that thumbs up button. It always helps. Find Audrey on Twitter at OddSnyder4. Find me on Twitter at John Sauber. Read Audrey at The Athletic. Read me at CenterDaily.com. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great day.